Hello and welcome to the Remembering Akron podcast. I'm your host, Derek Maxfield, and today my guest is Arthur Lucas. I understand you were born in Canada.
I was,
Arthur.
Belleville, Ontario.
And how did you end up in Akron, New York then?
My parents came here when I was a fairly young guy. I was in fifth grade.
Tell me about your parents.
Well, my dad and mom both were born in Toronto. My dad was worked for his father, who owned a meatpacking plant, and that's how we ended up in Belleville, because they were opening up an operation up there. And then eventually my parents decided they wanted to move to the United States, and they did.
What motivated them?
Well, my dad was a truck driver, and the wages were much better over here.
I see.
So he decided that for himself and his family that it would be a good move for him.
So you were quite young when you came to the United States. Do you remember the move at all?
Oh, absolutely, sure. Yeah, I was about 9.
Uh-huh. And what memories do you have of the move itself? Were you disoriented? Or you thought it's pretty much the same?
Not so much. It was an experience that, I mean, now nobody wants to be different, especially when you're at that age. Everybody wants to just be normal, if you will. And being a Canadian kid, I sounded like a Canadian, eh? And so, of course, that was a bit of an issue. That's probably the biggest issue of all. Other than that, I mean, society is the same over there as here.
So you grew up in Akron. Did you graduate from the Akron school?
I didn't. Actually, I grew up in Niagara Falls.
Okay.
And then moved to Akron when I was 21.
I see.
Bought a house here.
So you graduated from school in Niagara Falls.
Right.
I see.
Yeah.
And right out of high school, did you go to college immediately?
I did. I went to Erie Community and was enrolled in civil technology and did better in some courses than others. And I didn't finish it, but I don't regret going.
Why civil technology?
I was thinking maybe it was transferable to engineering.
I see.
And I was thinking maybe become a civil engineer.
All right. And so when you left college, what did you go on to next?
Actually, I became a welder, and I worked for Frontier Stone up in Lockport.
All right.
Welding on crushers and things like that.
And eventually you found yourself working for freight carriers.
Yes, I did. Back in 1977, it was a really bad year. As people remember, we had a nasty storm, and besides that, it was a very cold year. And the frost got very deep in the dirt. And when you work for a quarry, in the wintertime, you'll strip back the overburden, and that would keep people busy throughout the winter, taking all the dirt off the top of the rock. And then the next season, they'd have exposed rocks to detonate and then break and crush.
Tell me how you met your wife.
Actually, it's my second wife, Judy.
Okay.
And we met online.
Okay. That's increasingly becoming a thing these days, isn't it?
It is. And we met like about 6 years ago, which at the time it was kind of like, people are all concerned, like maybe you're going out with a serial killer or something.
Right.
But yeah, it was interesting.
That was interesting.
It worked out well.
All right. So you did some work with the fire department. Is that in Akron?
Yeah, I was with Akron for about 33 years, I think it was total.
Wow, 30 years. That's a long time.
Yeah. And I was I held several offices over those years. And
do you have any particular tragedies that you remember from those years? Something stand out in your mind about those years of service?
Probably the biggest potential was Akron oil fire. It had the potential to devastate this town, which in hindsight, I'm really glad that some of the things that were done, and that some of the things that could have happened didn't. I don't think most people realize how close that we were to having a major incident, either having a bloody tank. One in particular, back then we still had a rail line, and we brought a bunch of empty railroad cars to line them up next to Akron Oil, which was lined right up with a horizontal tank that when it was burning around it, you know, the sound, I mean, it was a roar. It was a whistling. There was a lot of noise involved in it. And one of the things that had happened was that one of the relief valves, or many of the relief valves, they sat on top of a pipe. And those pipes got hot and bent down and squeezed them off, just like you would a garden hose. So they were no longer venting the way they should. And there were tanks that were very fortunate they were riveted rather than welded, because they actually started to leak around the rivets because the steel got so hot and it got so much pressure, it actually started to pleat around where the rivets were holding the tanks together, and that relieved the pressure. If that hadn't, there's more than likely it was going to levy and shoot basically across the village, right up Cedar Street, if in fact it had levied.
Mm-hmm. Wow, sounds like a tragedy averted then.
You know, as a village, I think we're all very fortunate that, you know, it played out and nobody got hurt.
That's wonderful. So eventually you found yourself working in disaster planning?
Well, that's one of my duties when I was assistant chief, was to do pre-planning for different events, pre-plan fires, pre-plan different things, including disasters. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we're very fortunate at that point that we had never had any commercial aircraft come down in our area. But anybody who's from Akron knows that there's a lot of air traffic on the approach into Buffalo, and that so we're at the right mileage away from the Buffalo airport. I think it's like 6 to 8 miles is where the majority of the mishaps happen. So I started doing some pre-planning, and part of that I went to Rochester to a mass fatalities seminar put on by the federal government. There was FEMA was there, and U.S. Department of Health, Human Services, and it was a great course. And actually, it changed things for me quite a bit. I was more or less recruited to join them because I'm active in critical stress management. I'm a peer counselor for the Western New York Stress Reduction Program. And at that time, in the early 90s, that was pretty cutting edge. There wasn't many people that were involved in the mental health aspect, if you will, of emergency services.
Mm-hmm. So from that, you found yourself activated at the time of 9/11.
I was. And I got on the DMORT team, which stands for Disaster Mortuary Operational Response Team, which is part of the National Disaster Medical System. And I was on it for many years. And I had not been called out for training or nothing, basically, very, very little. And then on 9/11, I got a call to go to New York City, and it was I know it sounds kind of hollow, but it was such an honor to be a kid from small town America who gets a phone call from the federal government. It's time for you to go to work at the biggest disaster our nation's ever suffered. It was a life-changing event.
I'll bet. So were you called to New York?
I was. Went down to Manhattan and stayed there for 5 weeks. And I worked at the morgue. And
so they set up a headquarters or something for these responders to gather?
Each unit more or less takes care of their own building.
I see.
And DMORT took over a hotel in Manhattan.
I see.
And they set up their communications there. There was antennas that were taking windows on the side of this huge building and putting communications equipment in. And then I was asked if I'd be okay working in the morgue. And I've done body recoveries and things of that nature with the fire department over the years. But so I said, yeah, if I have a problem, I'll let you know. And so I just ended up working on a table for 5 weeks with an ME.
Oh, my goodness. And so how soon after 9/11 did you arrive in Manhattan?
Well, I was called on, about 11 o'clock in the morning, noon. And I left that night. Of course, all the planes weren't flying. And so I had to drive down. And I had finished my day as the truck driver, which is what paid the bills. And everywhere I went, people were saying, well, you should take some of this. You should take this. Take a case of this. You know, it was gumballs from Akron, from Ford Gum. I had several industrial suppliers. One guy gave me a case of gloves. Said, take some gloves with you. You're going to need these. And so I had my pickup truck, so I had a whole bunch of different stuff in the back of the truck that people had kind of reached out to send me down with.
Well, that's wonderful that the community kind of gathered around you to send you with all of these things that they thought you might need. What were your first impressions when you arrived? Was it chaotic?
You know, it was. The very first night we spent at Stewart Air Force Base, which is probably 45, 50 miles from New York City.
Okay.
And when I pulled up, they were, of course, in a heightened security. And there was a very large truck, and there was Jersey barriers. And the truck moved, you pulled into the Jersey barriers, and they asked you out of the truck. They come out with the dog and a guy with a mirror and a flashlight, and they're looking under the truck, in the truck, and checking your credentials before they let you on base. And then I can remember getting to this huge hangar, and there was thousands of cots set up, and there was only maybe a dozen people there. And so met up with a few of my fellow DMORT folks, and we finally went to bed. And I am a good sleeper. And got up in the morning, and there was thousands of people there. They had moved in facilities for showering and washrooms, and they had set up a small dormitory, if you will.
Wow. And so did they shuttle you from the base into the city?
Actually, I drove down to just across the street from LaGuardia in a Marriott Inn, and we took that over to begin with.
I see. And
because the thought was that we were going to need a lot of room, and again, not to diminish the tragedy. Over 3,000 people died and continue to die from that event. But when we were told as a group that we were initially, when we went there, because there was probably, I'm just guessing, probably 500,000 or more people directly in harm's way when those buildings came down. Mm-hmm. And 3,000, if you were to pre-plan that incident and say that everything happened, and that 3,000 people would perish, you would say, let's get real here. It's going to be more than three. It has to be, because there's so many people involved in it.
Right.
And so consequently, DMORT took over a hangar, and we proceeded to have it cleaned and power washed, and then there was many refrigerated trailers that were contracted to come out and be placed as part of our operation to deal with, realistically, 50,000. That was the number we were looking at initially. So, like I say, not to diminish the 3,000.
Right.
But when that number first started coming out, it was like, no, I don't think so. Because most of the people in DMORT are in, law enforcement, disaster, a local level, local disaster coordinators, or EMS, fire. kind of have an understanding of how things like this could go. And when the numbers started coming down to be that low, it was like, that can't be. And DMORT the DMORT mission is always to support the local response. And the local response is always the one that maintains authority. We are there to serve them. And so when New York City came back and said, well, we're going to do it out of the Manhattan morgue, and I think they have 5 different morgues in the city, and it was inconceivable that was going to be enough room, to do what needed to be done. Well, New York City is like it has more resources than most countries do. And when they need more room, they tore down a house.
Oh, my.
Tore down a house and paved the lot. And this all happened in like a 24-hour period.
Wow.
The house went away, the lot went in, and there's room for, I don't know how many trailers we had. I think it was 28 or 30 tractor-trailer reefers, and Memorial Park was set up.
Wow. That's efficiency.
Oh, it's incredible, the resources of the city.
So once you were there and you were set up at the morgue there, did you work at body recovery, or did somebody else recover the bodies and then bring them to you?
They were recovered at site and then brought to the morgue.
Wow. So how soon did the bodies begin to arrive there?
Before I did.
How many bodies were there before you got there?
I don't really know.
Yeah.
Because it's a system.
So what was your job day to day once you were there?
Actually, I was assisting a medical examiner, and I would help them open the bags and help examine them, and then I was what they call the clean guy, the DNA guy. Not that I'm trained in DNA per se, but it was my job to take a small tissue sample. And the reason they call me clean is because they didn't want any DNA that wasn't actually from the victim to end up
in the sample
being analyzed. So that's what I did for 5 weeks, and I more or less managed the table for them.
So how many bodies do you think you examined?
It was very violent when the buildings came down, and the majority of the they were fragments. Some we DNA'd everything bigger than a thumb. But.
Wow. That had to have been a traumatic experience for you. Do you still have flashbacks or difficulty handling this now?
No, I don't. I think it's just managing it properly.
I see.
And thinking about what you're thinking about, which sounds kind of double talk, if you will.
Yeah.
But it's important to think about what you're thinking about and why you're thinking about what you're thinking about. So it's kind of like self-analyzing, I guess. I think that's important. And to recognize certain things that may be a bit of a trigger. And one of them is, and for anybody that's a Harley Davidson person, I apologize. One of the things that would happen is whenever a member of service, being fire or police, was brought to the morgue, everything stopped. Everybody went off the street, they received them. And they were preceded by Harley Davidson motorcycle cops. And so that sound to me, definitely, I know that is a trigger. But with that kind of stuff, to know your enemy is more important than anything else. And in that case there, I know the sound of that is kind of takes me back, even not that I lose it or anything, but It's definitely something that, oh yeah, I remember that.
Okay. So it sounds like you've come through it without too much trauma then.
Yeah, I think I did. And, I think a lot of it is what doesn't break you makes you stronger kind of thing.
I see.
I really think you do build a certain amount of resilience by when you are exposed to that kind of stuff without, but managing it.
I see.
And there was a lot of support between our fellow people, and there's times you go outside and somebody look, hey, how are you doing?
Yeah.
And then we'd say it like a kid from New York, but it was a true heartfelt question. How are you doing?
Yeah.
And I got a chance to actually do some peer counseling informally with a lot of cops and firefighters that just didn't, and for New York City. And I mean, anybody that's in fire EMS has the greatest respect for New York City, because so many things that we do today are done because New York City started doing it that way. And I mean, they're a terrific city, but one of the things that they didn't do is that they really didn't have any sort of peer counseling or critical stress management in place. And so it was kind of rewarding to talk to some of these guys about what's going on, and had some pretty heartfelt discussions.
I'll bet.
And probably the most powerful. You asked me what was my biggest memory. Being the pure counselor kind of guy. We had down at the end of the row, there was a memorial wall, and it was for firefighters and EMS personnel, and it was kind of it was their own memorial. It wasn't open to the public. It was behind a secured area, and fire trucks, ambulances would show up, crew would get out, they'd pay their respects, they'd say a prayer, whatever, and they get back in and leave. And I walked down one day and I was talking to a guy, and before it's all said and done, here's two grown men bawling their eyes out in the middle of the street. Because it was one of them things, there just was no answers. There was no answer to be had. So, but that would probably be the most powerful.
Well, that's a great memory.
It is.
Were you satisfied with the political response to the emergency?
I think I was like everybody. We were kind of frustrated that nothing was happening instantaneous. And without getting too political, I'm in hindsight happy that we didn't go off and do something before, that we had a measured response rather than a knee-jerk response.
Right.
I think it was done the right way.
I see. And it sounds like New York City's response was pretty good. Of course, Rudy Giuliani gets so much credit for what he did.
Yeah. We were down, one of the days we were down on the pier, and we were doing some work down there, and Rudy Giuliani and his troop came in. Whenever he traveled with many people. But anyways, he kind of broke away from his people and come over to a group of us. We were waiting for a bus to go back. And one of the parts of the conversation was, thanks for coming to my town and helping me put it back together. And that's kind of powerful. And then to hear him use that same phrase later that day on his daily briefing, but
nice. That's really
it was.
Nice.
It was, yeah.
So that's a pretty remarkable experience. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
I'm sorry it wasn't more Akron, but it's because of Akron.
Well, it touches all of us, doesn't it?
Department. Oh, it does.
It
yes.
does.
Yeah.
Humanity.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Arthur.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening in, and remember to tune in to the next episode of Remembering Akron.